everyone, and welcome to another edition of Rack and Roll, Future Proofing Your Warehouse. I'm your host, Ashley Felposh. Today's focus is on testing and supply chain systems. By the end of this session, you'll gain a solid understanding of the best practices for testing supply chain systems, identifying potential issues, and ensuring seamless integration and functionality. Joining me today is Bill Hayden, Senior Solution Architect of Alliances at Tricentis. Hi, Bill. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Want to introduce yourself and then we'll dive right in.
Yes, absolutely. As you said, Bill Hayden, Senior Solution Architect here at Tricentis. My entire job is to work with our partner ecosystem so they understand the challenges that the industry is facing and how we can all work together to help overcome those challenges. I've been in this business for about 25 years now. This gray hair is very well earned. So when I talk about these topics, I really talk about it from a historical perspective about where we have been, where we are now, and where we're going. And where we're going is very exciting.
Definitely. So for starters, would you want to just tell the audience what is software testing?
So there are so many definitions to testing. What I like to say at a high level is testing is part of the process of de-risking change. Think about the change that occurs throughout all of our environments every day. It used to be that we maybe did one or two big upgrades a year. But now we're looking with all these new SaaS models at doing multiple, if not dozens, a quarter. So, how do you keep up with that? How do you ensure that when I update my supply chain system, my business fundamentally will still run and that the data that I'm looking at to make my business decisions will be correct? So, it is the art of ensuring all of that. And it's just one portion of the process, whether we're doing that manually or whether we're using some level of automation to simulate maybe a single user in the system or even hundreds, if not thousands of users in the system. And that's just functional performance. We could talk about security testing. We could talk about bias testing. There are all sorts of realms of that that all roll up under quality. And quality, really, at the end of the day, is just de-risking change to allow organizations to move faster, save money, and get ahead of the market.
Definitely. That's a great explanation. And it's clear that software testing is crucial for ensuring the quality of any system. So within the supply chain realm, why would a company look into testing within their software and when would you use testing?
Well, like we talked about, how are you ensuring that change is not going to adversely impact your company's ability to do business day to day? Great example in the Blue Yonder world. Systems never exist in a vacuum. They're always talking to other systems. In fact, if you look at like an SAP or a Blue Yonder, on average, there are 50 different integration points that are meant and need to be tested in order to ensure that the entire organization is functioning. And in one case, we actually had an upgrade, not in Blue Yonder, but in SAP, cause an issue where every bit of material this company produced was shipped to the same physical address over a 24-hour period. Now, on paper, that doesn't seem like a disaster, but it costs millions of dollars to have to undo those errors. And if this pace of change, which by the way, today is as slow as it's ever going to be again, it's only going to get faster, continues to increase, quality has to be that last line of defense, that guardian, not only to ensure that things function, but that business functions as well. It's almost as if we're going from quality assurance to business assurance when we're talking about these systems that run the backbone of organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any downtime or errors can lead to significant operational issues impacting everything from inventory accuracy to customer satisfaction. So completely, yeah, completely understand. What are the types of benefits that a company would get when testing with the testing process?
Well, apart from keeping the lights on, I always like to tie it back to three core benefits that really the C suite is justifiably single mindedly obsessed with. First of all, the ability to move faster. We have to be able to get these changes out in the environment so we can get a leg up on the competition and be more agile in business. But to do that, we have to be able to de risk that change. Believe it or not, traditionally quality has been the barrier to that. It's been the stumbling block. It's been the thing that slowed everything down. What we at Tricentis have figured out through our founder Wolfgang's vision is how to change that to being the force multiplier. So you can move faster, you can de-risk change, and that ultimately results in lower cost. Great example. There was a company utility company in the Carolinas that was upgrading their backbone systems. And with our tools and the right methodologies and the right people, and I want to stress that it's all three, it's not just the technology. They were able to complete this project 7 months ahead of schedule at a savings of $4.3 million. That's real material impact brought about by the testing organization, being able to test less things more intelligently, being able to apply automation in an intelligent way and leverage that for both functional and performance. So when people think about quality, tying it back to 7 months ahead of schedule and a $4.3 million savings, that's real tangible results that gets the attention of the C-suite.
No doubt. That is significant. And additionally, consistent testing can provide companies with competitive edge, no doubt. So I hear a lot about manual testing and automated testing. I know you mentioned that above, but can you define each of those?
Oh, absolutely. So, like I said, I have been in this business for a while. I actually started in the build up to Y2K, if anyone remembers that fun back in the 90s. And back in the day, testing started out as manual. I'm literally going to pull people out of the business and have them test the system when I made any upgrade. Maybe it's the accounting department over a weekend. I throw pizza at them, everything still works. That's great. Well, we got to a point where things were moving too fast, even back then. So we came up with the idea to automate those manual processes where you literally see the mouse dart around the screen, you see fields being filled, and you see buttons being pressed, and we look at the results. And we thought, oh, this is going to put manual testing out of business. This is great. But it never quite lived up to what its promise was. And the reason why is because all these great new automated tools that we're using relied on us to build scripts. And they were in some sort of language, whether it was a scripting language or coding language. And a vast majority of automation tools to this day still rely on that approach. Why is that a problem? Well, you're building a secondary code base to test a primary code base. So the more test coverage you have, the bigger your maintenance problem. As a result, back in, I believe it was the early 2000s, a gentleman named Charlie Lee wrote a book on this topic. And he said, with the tools of the time, if you are automating more than 40% of your tests, you're spending more time fixing it than running it. There's no ROI there. And that was 20 years ago. How have things increased in velocity since then? So that problem is super acute now. That number is down closer to 15 to 20% coverage. And if you do have more than that, you have a small army of people trying to maintain it, to keep it running. So what happens the other 80, 85%? Manual, you guessed it, or it's not being done at all. So why is Tricentis different? Our founder figured out a way to do automation through what he called a visual model-based approach. There is no code, literally no code. He took code out of the equation. So when we look at a test, we don't see lines of code. We literally see visual models of each screen that we're interacting with or each API. So it's very readable. The business can understand it even if they've never seen our tool before. Very easy to maintain. We're able to sustain 80 to 90% automated coverage with positive ROI without having to throw a small army of people at it. So that the manual testing is relegated more to the user acceptance. And that really opens the door for what Wolfgang called continuous enterprise testing. In fact, he wrote a book called Enterprise Continuous Testing to talk about this, that the test would constantly run in reaction to any change that comes anywhere in those 50 touch points around our systems, whether it's SAP, Blue Yonder, Oracle, Workday, you name it, so that we find issues up front before they get into production cost us $1 million problem. And sometimes it can be something as subtle as a decimal point. There's an organization in Central Florida that I work with a lot that had a tax calculation that went from 2 decimal points to 4 decimal points. This cost them millions of dollars in 2 weeks to find. And that brings up another great point about testing in general. It's not just testing the screens and the flows. You've got to test the data as well. If we're going to make business decisions from this, we have to ensure that the data integrity is intact too.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. It's clear both methods have their place, but definitely having a system or process for both is important. So our organization has been in the supply chain execution space for many years, WMS, TMS, robotics. But testing is a lot more than that. It can really affect the whole enterprise. So can you explain that?
Well, it goes back to some of those challenges that we've talked about. These systems are our business now. It's not that, for instance, we are in the business of making carpet. There's a lot of carpet mills around where I live. We are IT companies that just happen to be in the carpet business. And that's really the mental shift people have gone through in the last 15 years. Another great example, my friends down at Darden Foods, they own Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse, some of the other brands you're very familiar with. They realized during COVID that as good of a restaurant company as they are, they were really a digital enterprise company that happened to be in the restaurant business. If I were to order spaghetti online from Olive Garden's website, it touches 27 different systems in order to get that spaghetti out to the curb. So you think about how intrinsically linked everything is now. One little change can upset that. And it doesn't matter if you're in the carpet business, the spaghetti business, or you're sending people to the moon. All industries have this challenge. And as soon as they realize they're really digital enterprises that just happen to be in the business that they started with, they're going to understand the impact of this. And that just drives quality to the forefront.
Absolutely. And quality is what every business is focused on. So from a testing perspective, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I would like to talk about where we're going in the future. I talked a little bit about the
Absolutely.
past. I talked about the present, where we're really seeing massive innovation. I'm sure this will come as no surprise to anyone listening, is in the realm of machine learning and generative AI with large language models. And we started working those capabilities into our systems about 5 years ago. We started with an intelligent change impact analysis system that would tell us exactly what we needed to test based on a machine learning analysis of how systems are being used in production and then comparing that to changes coming to lower environments. We then expanded that into new ways to recognize objects in our automation. We created something called Vision AI, which is almost like facial recognition. It doesn't matter what the application's written in, it just matters what it looks like on the screen. And that's opened up some very interesting possibilities. For instance, I can do a hand-drawn picture of a screen on a napkin and actually build my automation model off a JPEG of that, and it'll run in production. So it's very flexible.
That's
We then took
incredible.
Oh, and you should see how it demos. We all held our breath the first time. We also looked at self-healing. So we talked about easing that maintenance trap. So there are two big time-consuming efforts when it comes to test automation: creating the tests and maintaining the tests. I feel like we are really on top of maintaining the tests through the visual model-based approach and self-healing, which will actually auto-update the tests on execution if anything changes, like a button might change from continue to enter, for instance, very common case. Would break a lot of traditional automation suites. With our self-healing, we overcome that. But now how do you tackle that first piece? And that is where I had the I would say, good fortune and luxury to really show off these capabilities at a trade show just last week. With generative AI and the ability to examine a live system as well as requirements, epics, user stories, etc., we are very soon going to be able to auto-generate automation at the time of execution. It will literally just figure out what needs to be done, create its own automation on the fly, and run it to get to the next screen. For instance, when we first pioneered this about a year ago, we gave it a very simple test with a mobile test. We basically told it, here's a phone, turn on the power saver. We didn't tell it if it was Android or iOS. We didn't tell it how many steps. We didn't tell it how many screens. And it literally figured out each screen, took its best guess as to what to do next, created the automation itself on the fly until it got to the next screen. So now I'm not maintaining tests at all. I'm literally just maintaining high-level descriptions. 6 months later, we were able to replicate that with an insurance system. 6 months after that, we were able to replicate that with an SAP Fiori system, which is what I was showing off at the trade show. So that challenge of initial test creation is going to be addressed in a very creative way. But I do want to say this about generative AI. For everyone out there in testing and quality, this is the greatest challenge we have ever faced. We cannot take these things at face value. We have to be the last line of defense, the guardians in the loop, to ensure that what they are giving us is actually meaningful, useful, and not completely off the reservation. Believe me, our friends and developers are already using it to generate code at a rate we've never seen. So we're going to have to fight fire with fire. But generative AI is never going to be a replacement for the craft worker in the loop that has a contextual understanding of how the business needs to operate and how these systems need to run. So hopefully I was able to spur your imagination, and give you a little bit of caution as to where we're going in the future.
Absolutely. That honestly, it's all incredible. But like you said, take it for face value, and we have a lot of things to coming up, exciting stuff going on. So, embracing continuous testing as a core part of the development and operational processes allows companies to quickly respond to changes and new challenges, and that's really what it boils down to. So thank you everybody for joining our edition of Rack and Roll. We hope you found today's discussion on testing supply chain systems insightful and valuable. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is provided in the description below. And until next time, stay innovative and keep future-proofing your warehouse. Goodbye.